Well, Pros, I did it. I made him really, really mad at me. But I want to be clear what follows is not an apology. Today, I want to go over some social media drama that happened when I made a parallel that people didn't like, that they thought was off color and off putting. And Uh, while this isn't going to be an apology, because I think what I said was valid, and I didn't insult anybody, and I didn't really say anything wrong. I don't think, and I'll leave this to you. This is one of the ones where I definitely want some comments below, and let me know if you think I'm going wrong. But what I want to discuss here is the value of inflammatory rhetoric. Is this something that's valuable to do sometimes? I think there are cases where it is. It's okay to be inflammatory sometimes to make an off-color, off-putting parallel that gets the point across. And maybe I'll say that I made this parallel off-putting on purpose. When people responded, "I can't believe you would say that." It's like, no, I did that on purpose. It was controversial on purpose in order to get you to think about this parallel. So here's what happened. I saw someone who is a bit of a cage stage situation. You can tell they're kind of in the beginning of their cage stage, and we don't begrudge them that. The cage stage is something that we go through across all kinds of theologies or ideologies. When we think we found the truth of something, we're really passionate about it. And so you can tell this guy's kind of on the cage stage. And he said something, and I responded to it, to directly what he said. And what I did is I took what he said and put it in a different context. So I'm just going to show you. So you'll notice what I'm doing is I'm responding to something that somebody else said. This guy says, somebody defends Leighton Flowers and says Leighton Flowers never withered. I think from teaching the Bible is kind of what they're talking about. He says he lifts up the God of Scripture, whose love and provision is offered to all. So he's saying that it is scriptural that God's love and provision is offered to all. And this cage stage Calvinist responds with, "No, my friend, he's taking the love of God with no effect. True love is not offered, but given." So he says true love is not offered, but given. So in response to the provisionist theology that God's love and provision is offered to all, that what we say all the time is that we want you to be firmly convinced that God loves every man, woman, boy, and girl, and Christ died for everyone, and anyone can be saved. These things that we say all the time. In response to that, he's saying, no, no, no. Love isn't offered, it's given. Okay. I am I want to be clear that I was responding to this in particular. And you will notice that all I do is respond to this particular quote. I don't generalize it to say all of Calvinism is like this, because that's what some people are going to accuse me of later. But I respond to this particularly, and I put it into admittedly and purposefully, I put it into a inflammatory context to bring home the point. But think about this for a second. I'm looking at this, and he says, true love is given. It's not offered, it's given. What does that sound like to you? That sounds to me like something some CSI villain would say. Somebody on Person of Interest or one of these cop shows, some creepy villain. That's the thing that they would say. And so I put it into that context. I gave a kind of faux dialogue here where the detective says, that woman said you forced yourself on her. And the perp says, I showed her true love. The detective, how's that? Perp, true love is not offered, but given. So I just quote him, right? The detective says, so is true jail time. True jail time. It's harder to say than you think. And then I get snarky and I say, spiritual rape is cool when God does it, y'all. And I think that's what everybody's kind of mad about. Everybody's mad about that phrase, the spiritual rape phrase. And it's cool when God does it, y'all. And I'm being sarcastic. What does that sound like to you? Am I really taking crazy pills that when somebody says true love is given, not offered. True love is offered, not given. True love is given and it's not offered. What does that sound like to you? Doesn't that sound a little rapey? Just I just I'm that sounds like a violation. That sounds like somebody's autonomy is being violated when that love is being given. And so I put it on into that context and I made an inflammatory analogy for it. Now, I honestly, hand to God, was not doing this to make people angry. I'm really not interested as much as I like snark and sarcasm, and you all know that I do. I'm not trying to make people angry. I'm not really in it to own the Calvinists. Lulls to own the Calvinists. That doesn't really interest me. One, because I think that kind of thing is pretty dumb. And I want you to hear this, Prof. Pers. I want you to hear this. I think that's kind of dumb to just try to make people mad on purpose. But number two, because the Calvinists get mad no matter what I say. And that's one of the things I want to talk about here and why I'm recording this is I really want you to see as you get out there and you defend provisionism or you criticize Calvinism, you defend provision for all in your churches or whatever in your sphere of influence. This is the kind of responses you're going to get, and I want you to be ready for them, to know that they're coming, and to see what's behind them. So I really wasn't thinking. I understand this was spicy and inflammatory, and kind of an off-color analogy that was purposeful to bring home the point, but I wasn't thinking that it was going to make people really, really mad. So it did make people mad. And here's some of the responses here. Here's what happened. It was sent to somebody over at Deuteronomy. It was sent to the Deuteronomy guy, Deuteronomy, get it? And he claimed that what I said is I was likening Calvinism to a spiritual violation. That's what I was doing, that I was likening all of Calvinism to that. If you'll notice again in my OP, my original post here, all I was doing was responding to this individual person. If somebody reads that and takes it to say that this phrase, true love is not offered but given, that describes all of Calvinism, then they're saying that because I didn't say that. I wasn't even thinking that. I was thinking that this idea is terrible and we should all get on board, Calvinists and non-Calvinists, with rejecting this terrible idea that true love isn't offered, it's given. This is a terrible philosophical thing to say about true love. It's a terrible thing to say in general. It leads to really, really bad practice and theology, and we should reject this idea. That's what I was saying, but it was blown up to say that I was saying this about all of Calvinism. So this is one of the responses that Big Mad number 2 said to me. He said he memed me, and he says, you really just implied that Calvinists worship a spiritual serial violator, then said we shouldn't tone police each other. What makes you think you can act like this? And then this is supposedly me saying, well, I'm an admin, so which the idea is that I can get away with saying anything. The problem is that the first part that I said that Calvinists worship that's not what I said. I didn't say that Calvinists worship this kind of thing. I said exactly the opposite, that God isn't like this, that God isn't a person who's a being who just gives his true love and nobody has a choice in it. I was saying the exact opposite thing. So what's going to happen when you make spicy parallels that bring home a point starkly in a way that kind of jars you, you're going to get these kind of responses where they misrepresent what you said. This is what kind of in clarifying that, this is what I said originally. I said, it's fascinating that Calvinist ire is directed at me for saying what we all know. If given in any other context besides Calvinism, true love is not offered as given, would be seen as a violation of the autonomy of the person who receives that quote unquote love. Just move the quote from the special pleading of Calvinistic soteriology to a human endeavor, and we all understand how asinine and dangerous it is to say, true love is given, not offered. You know, that's my clarification on what I was saying. So, and then this is Big Mad number one. Big Mad number said, despicable, disgusting comparison, but not surprising coming from me. It is, I agree that it is despicable and disgusting to liken God's love to something that is given without the choice of the receiver. I think that's disgusting. And I think we should all not agree with that. And we should all find that to be a terrible idea. But I'm wondering about this. It is controversial and it is off-putting. But is it despicable and disgusting to make any kind of comparison of that sort? I sure hope not, because R.C. Sproul, in this book, Thy Brother's Keeper, said this: on the 14th night, the battle ceased, the hound prevailed, and Scooter had no alternative. This was not a religious decision. It was unconditional surrender, a docile submission to the holy rape of the soul. So in telling some story about how God's love comes on us, R.C. Sproul, likens it to the holy rape of the soul. So I'm not the only one that has made this kind of comparison. Is it disgusting when R.C. Sproul says it? Also, Charles Spurgeon said this: some men cannot endure to hear the doctrine of election. I suppose they like to choose their own wives, but they are not willing that Christ should choose his own bride, the church. This is similar, very, very similar to the kind of idea that I was arguing against. Remember, the Calvinist House Responding to says, true love is not offered, it's given. And Charles Spurgeon says that election, unconditional election, that has no choice, the doctrine of unconditional election, where the person receiving the election, who God has chosen before eternity past to be saved, that their volition, their choice has nothing to do with that. And he likens that to marriage, to choosing a wife. That's not how choosing a wife works nowadays anyway. That's not how we think choosing a wife should work. That's not how we believe love should work. The person who is being loved by the man, the wife who's being loved by the man, or the potential wife, should have a choice in the matter. There's a meme about this. I think it's pretty great. Calvinists, God choosing us is unilateral and not based on our willingness, like when we select a wife. Normal person, that's not how selecting a wife works, and it sounds a little like a violation. Calvinist, how dare you? How dare you? You're stealing my childhood. It's a little bit rich that Calvinists can make this comparison, and it's okay when they do it. We have all kinds of charity for the comparison they're making, but when I make it, it's despicable and disgusting. So you tell me in the comments below, are there certain comparisons that are just out of bounds because they're out of bounds? Is that how dialogue in the realm of ideas works, that there are just some comparisons we cannot make? Or is it okay to, from time to time, make inflammatory comparisons in order to bring the point home? Now, one of the other things that what I'll get to next is a little bit of the, not just, I'm not the only one who's made this comparison, other Calvinists have made this comparison throughout history, but also a little bit of the hypocrisy of talking about rhetoric coming from the Reformed side. And what we'll find is that they're okay with inflammatory, even kind of gross rhetoric if it comes from other people. But actually, let's do this first. One of the other accusations I got was what ended up Big Mad number two. It got to the place, and our dialogue was over when he said that I was being a big jerk. He called me a jerk, and you're going to get name called when you engage in these things. It's going to happen to you, and you just have to be prepared for it. You have to be able to move past it. And The reason that I'm able to see past it is because what he means that I am being disrespectful to his favorite theology, to his beloved theology that he cares about personally and he personally identifies with. I'm being disrespectful towards it. And that's true. That's true. I am being disrespectful towards it. But the question that I have is, do we always have to speak what our opponent would consider to be respectfully about ideas we think are harmful and wrong? One of the things we always talk about here on the provisionist perspective is how harmful some of these ideas are. And this is why we talk about them. Just think about the implications for Christian life and practice if true love is given and not offered. Just think about that for a moment. And you can see why I'm opposing it and why I'm being disrespectful towards that idea. Is it always wrong to be disrespectful towards ideas that you think are harmful and wrong? Steve Lawson can say this about non-Calvinists. The free will is a pagan goddess that the church has worshipped for too long. And I wanted to show it to you like this because I wanted to show you. I'll put that back up. I wanted to show you how they put flowery wallpapers behind it. They put flowery language in front of it. That this is, if you Google search this, you come up with page after page of how many times this has been reproduced, lovingly reproduced into all these nice quotes by these sites. This quote: "The free will is a pagan goddess that the church has worshipped for far too long." That's disrespectful. Comparing free will to pagan worship, which always included either baby sacrifices or fornication, or, I mean, if you were a pagan in the ancient world, going to a priestess, there weren't any brothels. You didn't need them because you had temples, and that's where the priestesses were. Likening that to free will, to all of us who believe in free will, Steve Lawson can do that till he's blue in the face, and nobody cries foul about his rhetoric or how disrespectful that is to fellow brothers and sisters in Christ. How disrespectful it is to compare the fact that if we believe that we just have to make a choice, that we have these autonomous wills that God isn't ultimately controlling. If we believe that, then it's the same thing as pagan worship, which always included these abhorrent practices, abhorrent sexual practices specifically. That's okay. He can be disrespectful towards that because he's Steve Lawson. He has the right thoughts. He means the right thing by it. And so he can make that comparison. R.C. Sproul can make the comparison. He can even use the same word that I used. And that's okay because he has the right thoughts. He means it in a right way. You may not prefer that he use that word. And that's a pretty obscure quote from R.C. Sproul. He did it once, and it seems like it's not something that he used, an analogy he used all the time. Pretty smart. But it's still an analogy that he used, and it's something that Spurgeon said. And that's a Spurgeon quote that people put out there quite regularly. They can do that, and that comparison is okay because they have the right thoughts. They mean the right thing by it. So it's not about that the comparison is wrong or that it's something that we can never make that comparison. It's what you mean by it. And if what you mean by it is disagreeing with Calvinism, then that's despicable and disgusting. Is it always wrong to have inflammatory rhetoric? Here is another, on this subject, I made another post, and this is just a few quotes from Luther. And this is from his book, Against the Roman Papacy, an Institution of the Devil. So Luther believes strongly against Rome, so strongly that he talks like this to them. "What do you say? Come here, Satan. If you had more worlds than this, I would accept them all, but not only worship you, but also lick your behind." So he's saying that the Rome would lick Satan's behind. And that's really rude. That's crass. That's disgusting talk. Here, let's do another one. Let's do another one. I was frightened and I thought I was dreaming. It was such a thunderclap. This is sarcasm. It was such a thunderclap, such a great horrid fart. Let you go that did you let go here? You certainly pressed with great might to let such a thunderous fart. It is a wonder that you did not tear your whole and belly apart. I mean, that's middle school stuff, right? That's middle school boy locker room talk, farty talk. This is the stuff my 8-year-old loves. She loves this sort of potty talk. If we want them to say cheese for a picture, we go butt cheeks, and they just laugh. They think it's hilarious. They're big old smiles. This is the way that he is talking about Rome because he disagrees so strongly with it. First of all, it's pretty funny the way he's talking. Let's just be honest. That's pretty funny. But secondly, doesn't this leave the Calvinists a little bit hypocritical here? And this, by the way, that's mild. There is an entire Lutheran insulter because this is all the insults. Look at all of this. And they made a generator out of it. They made a generator out of it. Check this out. You are poisonous and worthless gossips. Insult me again. You hit the button. Look this up. It's called the Lutheran Insulter. You can just click over and over again, and there's so many that it doesn't repeat very often of how many insults Luther had for those he disagreed with. R.C. Sproul, when asked if Arminians are saved, can say this.
I certainly hope so and believe so because I was one for 5 years after I was converted, before I became reformed in my theology, and I believed I was in a state of grace at that time. And I think that Arminianism is an extremely defective and weak theology, and one that has serious consequences and ramifications for the church in general and for the Christian individual in particular. But are they saved? I always like to say yes, but by a happy inconsistency. If they really believe what they say they believe, then I don't think they would be saved.
R.C. Sproul feels so strongly about his theology that he says harsh words about Arminian theology. Why can't we do the same? And he says something, I mean, that's pretty insulting. Let's be honest. It's pretty insulting that if people who are not Reformed, Provisionist, non-Calvinist, Arminian types, we are going to hell if we actually believed our theology. So in order to go to heaven, we have to be inconsistent at best and like kind of dumb at worst, because who isn't consistent with their theology? People who aren't that learned, people who have a cognitive dissonance, people who might be kind of dumb. I mean, he has to say that really he doesn't say it this way, obviously, but he's suggesting that really only inconsistent or dumb Arminians are going to heaven. It's pretty rude, pretty strong stuff. But he can talk like that, and that's okay. Here's another guy from Ligonier Ministries, and this is what he has to say, considering whether or not Arminians are saved.
That's a great question. That was asked of William Ames at the Synod of Dort. You may have heard I've written a book on the Synod of Dort.
I have heard.
In that book, I talk about how William Ames, who was a great English Puritan and had to flee from England because he wouldn't conform to the Church of England, he was a Congregationalist, and had found a home in the Netherlands among the welcoming Dutch. And William Ames was the personal secretary to the president of the Synod of Dort in the early 17th century. And someone came to William Ames and said, is Arminianism a heresy? Which was a question in that old sense of heresy. Is Arminianism a theological error so serious that it will deprive someone of salvation? And Ames, a staunch Calvinist, a staunch Puritan, responded by saying, no, Arminianism is not a heresy. but it is a serious error tending to heresy.
So no, not all Calvinists believe that God is some sort of spiritual violator. But the idea that, like what Spurgeon said, Christ can choose, unconditional election is like choosing a wife, or like this Calvinist said, true love is given, not offered, leads to really bad places, can lead to terrible Christian theology and practice. If this guy can say it about my salvation, my status as being saved, and of course, Arminian means any non-Calvinist, then why can't I say it about Calvinist theology? So is it really this outlandish that we would be disrespectful towards ideas that we think are harmful, that we disagree strongly with? So fellow provisionist, be ready for this kind of response when you bring a spicy critique, a pointed critique using analogies that bring the point home strongly. When you don't speak flowery, you don't speak with petunias about Calvinism. You don't give the right amount of respect and deference to ideas you think are terrible. These are the kind of responses that you're going to get. This was somebody who I think responded correctly to this. He says to me, he says, the OP you're objecting to grated upon my emotions. The thought of God in such a way was disgusting. However, that was his point. Exactly. The point was to bring to your mind the disgusting parallel that comes with saying true love is given, not offered, and to get you to reconsider thinking this. Okay. However, that was the point. It was not to imply that Calvinists knowingly worship such a false image of God, but to challenge the logical conclusion of Calvinism. That's correct. I gave away the name here. I hope that's okay. I don't get in trouble. But Big Mad number 2 says, well, had the other side done the same, I doubt your comment would have been so gracious. This is the mindset. They project their own faux offense on us, as if when we see comments like Steve Lawson's, we go into fits of apoplexy. If we go into fits, we, Spurgeon said this, and we flip out. They think you're going to behave the same way that they do. And so they just assume that, if Calvinists did this, which they do, they make these kind of comparisons all the time about our theology. These kind of disrespectful and even emotionally grating comparisons. Entire Calvinist ministries are built on making these sort of spicy comparisons to non-Calvinist theology, to provisionist type, Arminian type theology. And they assume that if we ever saw something that offensive to us, we're going to go into convulsions like they do. But it's just not true. We don't. We deal with there are those that do, okay, but by and large, what we do is we deal with the idea. I know that all of you out there aren't. It's so ubiquitous all over the internet that we don't go into shock every single time we see a Calvinist quote that we disagree with. We understand what's going on. We understand the game that we're playing. We know that they own the internet and have all these ministries, and so we learn to roll with it. But Calvinists are so not used to being challenged in a disrespectful way that they have these emotional reactions to it and assume that you would react the same way. But that's not the case. There was one Calvinist, however, who went on to defend this idea. And it's a Calvinist who's been really active on the Soteriology 101 blog for a long time. And he's moved over to the Sot 101 discussion page on Facebook lately. And he defended this idea. He was the only one that was like, yeah, this is true love is given, not offered. That's exactly right. And And then, so notice what he says. He says, God exercises true love when he gives a person faith without asking beforehand if the person wants faith. So I agree with the OP. Where, where are all the Calvinists saying how disgusting he is? He has the right thoughts. He means the right thing by it. So he's okay. So I agree with the OP. Provision appears to see this as a spiritual violation. So I ask him, how's it not? How is it not a spiritual violation to give love without the other person having any say in the matter? That's like the definition of a violation, right? And so I thank him. I say thank you for being the only one man enough to address this. And he says that a spiritual violation is in the eye of the beholder. No one to whom God gives faith without asking if they wanted to would call it a spiritual violation. They would see it as a doctor using an automated external defibrillator, IAD, like if your heart stops. Those are in gyms and doctors' offices everywhere, to bring them back to life after their heart had stopped. So he changes the goalpost to say, oh, how would the violated person feel about it? If the violated person would feel okay about it, then it's okay. But that's not the question, is it? The question is it objectively a violation? The person who was given a love potion in their drink would still love the person that drugged them. If you ask them if they love the person that drugged them, they would say yes. Would you ask them if everything that person does is okay? They would say yes. If you ask the Christian post-regeneration, pre-faith regeneration, if they love God, they're going to say yes. That's not the question. The question is that actually a violation, objectively speaking, not how does the one violated feel about it? So that was the most defense for this he could muster. When I pointed out to him that he was shifting the focus and shifting the goalposts to how does the violated feel about it, he didn't have much to say and he left the conversation after that. But that's what I want. I want to engage in the ideas of it. And I used this analogy of a spiritual violation, knowing that it would grate on the emotions. I didn't know how angry people would get, but knowing that it would grate on the emotions to make that comparison, but to bring home the idea. Is it a good idea? Is it good theology? Is it good philosophy? And those two often are interchangeable and inseparable. Is it good philosophy, good theology to see God's love, God's true love, as given, not offered? That's the dialogue I want to have. And I want to bring home that point by using something spicy. So you tell me below, is it never okay to use inflammatory, inappropriate comparisons in order to bring home a valid point? Is it always bad to be disrespectful towards theology and ideas that you think are harmful? I'm sure most of you out there would agree. Let's take another idea that we would kind of collectively agree is a terrible idea and it affects people in a very, very negative way. Something like abortion, right? Now, I'm not comparing Calvinism to abortion. That's what people are going to say that I'm doing. What I'm doing is I'm comparing ideas that we think are terrible and harmful. Would you say that you always have to be respectful towards the idea and practice of abortion? Or would you say it would be okay to inflame people's emotions in order to tell them how terrible abortion is? Please, Lord, convince me that Calvinism isn't terrible theology. Lord, I pray that you would give me your grace to see that Calvinism isn't terrible theology if it isn't. If it is true, Calvinists, please pray for me that the Lord would monergistically change my heart on this matter. But hand to God, I believe sincerely, I have a deeply held belief that Calvinism is harmful theology. It is a harmful idea. In specific, the idea that God's love is given, not offered, that true love in general and God's love as the penultimate example of true love is given, not offered. I think that's a terrible idea with wide-ranging effects for my Christian brothers and sisters. Am I not allowed to be disrespectful towards that idea in order to get people to see how bad it is? Are you not able to, are you never able to be disrespectful to terrible ideas? You tell me below if you think that that's the standard we should have. And if it is, why aren't other Calvinists, why isn't Luther held to that standard? Why is he universally venerated? And you may say, I can hear a Calvinist now say, well, I didn't agree with him using farts and this kind of rhetoric towards Rome. I don't agree with his, yeah, but you don't criticize him for it. There isn't going to ever be a blog post written about from a Calvinist website written about how Luther shouldn't have talked to Rome like that, how Luther was rude and disgusting and disrespectful, and he shouldn't have talked like that. There's never going to be any sort of public critique of Luther and how he talked to Rome. There's never going to be a public critique of Steve Lawson and that he's making an inappropriate comparison that all of the Christians besides Reformed Christians are like pagan worshipers. They're never going to criticize it. Well, I don't agree. Well, you're very quiet about your disagreement, and that suits you pretty well. But yet, if we make disrespectful comparisons about your theology, you're apoplectic about it. Forgive me if that strikes me as a little insincere. And forgive me if I'm not sorry about it. I'm not sorry about it. And provisionists out there, as this is something that we've talked on this here a lot. Make broadcasts, make podcasts, make arguments, talk to people, get out there and tell people that God loves everyone, Christ died for everyone, and everyone can be saved. But when you do, know that this is the kind of stuff you're going to get. You're going to get this kind of faux offense in order to never talk about the point that you're making. You're going to get this just apoplectic emotional responses to get you to never say those words again, to make the noise so loud that you maybe kind of should I even, the next time you think about making some sort of comparison, or the next time you think about making some sort of argument, oh, what if they respond like that again? What if they were really mad at me last time I said something? And if you're actually rude and you're actually calling people names, you should repent. And you tell me if I'm getting it wrong here, and that I need to check my response here, and that I was rude to people during this. You guys tell me a lot of the stuff that we do here is on public forums. It's either on the Twitter machine or it's on the YouTube machine. A lot of this stuff, you tell us when we go off the rails here and we need to repent. But up until that point, know what you're getting yourself into. Know that this is the kind of responses you're going to get. And really, isn't it okay sometimes to give inflammatory comparisons, to use analogies that may grate on the emotions in order to bring home the points that we think are important, to bring home, to show the harm that some of these terrible theologies and ideas cause?